There's this invisible force operating right in the shadows of your mind, like right now. It's this quiet psychological architect that completely dictates every relationship you build, the trajectory of your entire career, and honestly, the deepest levels of your own internal peace. In this explainer, we're going to dive into the hidden machinery of human reaction. It's a deep dive into the very architecture of our impulses. And understanding this invisible force, well, it might just be the single most crucial psychological tool you can develop to actually survive the modern world.
So, imagine a moment you probably know all too well. Someone insults you. Maybe a colleague publicly questions your competence right in the middle of a meeting, or some stranger leaves a vicious, deeply personal comment on your post. What actually happens in the very next second? Before you can even form a conscious thought, there's this instant, massive biological surge. Your heart rate spikes. A sudden flash of heat just rises right up in your chest. Your muscles instantly tense up. In that microscopic fraction of a second, there is a desperate, burning desire to respond, to strike back, to defend yourself. For a brief, terrifying moment, it feels like the emotion itself has completely hijacked the wheel, making the decision for you. It feels like your reaction is absolutely inevitable.
But here's the thing, human reaction isn't just a single track. It actually splits into two profoundly different paths. Think about two people facing the exact same provocation. One person succumbs to that surge, right? They explode, unleashing this torrent of angry words that literally cannot be unsaid, instantly creating a chaotic conflict. Now the other person feels the exact same biological spark, the same heat, the same racing heart, yet they remain totally still. They slowly close their phone or quietly take a breath and just walk away. One creates a massive fire, the other totally starves it of oxygen. Both felt that violent urge, but only one became controlled by it.
So, what exactly lives in that tiny gap between the trigger and the reaction? We call it the invisible space. It's a space so incredibly small, so deeply buried in the milliseconds of our consciousness that most of humanity lives their entire lives without ever realizing it's even there. And yet, this microscopic, invisible gap is exactly where empires are built, it's where marriages are saved, it's where true, unshakable leadership actually emerges. History shows us this profound truth over and over again. The most powerful people in the room are almost never the loudest. They're the calmest. They're the individuals who have somehow mastered the quiet territory of this invisible space.
To really understand the glitch in our modern minds, we gotta look backward for a second. Long before skyscrapers and smartphones, human emotions served a singular, brutally simple purpose: keeping you alive. Imagine walking through a dark forest back in 10,000 BC. A sudden snap of a twig in the shadows. Yeah, that is not a moment for calm, philosophical reflection. Your brain doesn't stop to weigh the probabilities of the wind versus a hungry predator. It instantly assumes lethal danger. Over millennia, our psychology rigorously adapted to prioritize survival above all else. Speed became infinitely more valuable than precision. Unthinking reaction became way more important than quiet reflection.
And honestly, that brings us to the great tragedy of being human today. We are essentially walking around with ancient hardware in a completely alien environment. Modern life is not a dark forest. A critical comment from an anonymous profile, an embarrassing mistake in a midweek meeting, a mildly disappointing email from your boss. None of these are actually life or death situations. Yet your ancient biology literally cannot tell the difference. It reacts identically. Your body dumps cortisol and adrenaline, preparing your muscles for a brutal physical fight to the death when the only thing actually being threatened is your ego.
This biological mismatch leads us straight into a fascinating but incredibly dangerous trap: the illusion of relief. Why is emotional control so agonizingly difficult in the heat of the moment? Well, because giving in to the impulse feels incredibly satisfying. When you snap back at someone who questioned your abilities, your brain rewards you with a sudden surge of dopamine. For a brief, intoxicating second, you feel powerful, you feel vindicated, liberated even. Our ancient programming completely tricks us, equating waiting with weakness, constantly whispering in our ear that immediate, aggressive action is absolutely necessary to survive the psychological threat. But man, that quick dopamine hit, it masks a pretty devastating reality. The emotion eventually fades away, but the outcome? That remains forever. Just think about the permanent architecture we build using temporary feelings. The furious career-ending email you send in a blind rage, the catastrophic financial choice you make in a sudden panic, the deep, irreplaceable trust shattered over a fleeting moment of frustration. The emotional spike lasts maybe a few minutes, but the consequences stretch out for decades. We're literally letting temporary biological glitches permanently ruin the landscape of our lives.
Now, flip the script for a second. Picture the exact opposite scenario. Imagine this strange, almost unnerving power of calmness. Picture a highly chaotic boardroom. Voices are rising, egos are violently clashing, and the claustrophobia of this bitter argument is just filling the room. The tension is unbearable. And then, one person speaks. They speak calmly, slowly, without a single trace of visible emotional disruption. Almost instantly, the entire atmosphere shifts. The room quiets down. People actually listen. Why? Because in a sea of volatility, emotional stability signals profound psychological security. It signals a mind that absolutely cannot be conquered by its environment.
When you don't have that quiet stability, things get pretty unsettling. We basically hand the keys to our mind over to the external world. Think about it. A stranger on the internet types a few thoughtless words and your entire mood completely collapses for the day. A manager sends a vague two-word message and your entire weekend is ruined by spiraling anxiety. Someone simply ignores your text, and your entire internal thoughts are utterly consumed by insecurity. This is the tragic reality of emotional dependence. Your entire weather is being entirely dictated by people who, frankly, do not even care about you.
And that leads us to a pretty dark truth about human interaction. Whoever controls your emotions often controls part of your behavior. The more dependent you become on external emotional triggers, the more incredibly vulnerable you are to manipulation. Emotional dependence creates predictability. It essentially turns you into a machine where a specific input guarantees a specific output. And predictability leaves you completely open to influence. If an adversary or a marketer or an algorithm can guarantee they'll make you angry, they've already won.
And that exact vulnerability, that's what brings us to the modern dystopia we're all living in right now. We casually call it the attention economy, but let's be real. It's more accurately an emotional harvesting machine. We now live inside this massive, invisible, global network of servers explicitly engineered to exploit our impulses. These digital systems are designed by the brightest minds of our generation to trigger the exact ancient survival circuitry we were just talking about. They are literally farming your outrage for profit.
Because look, the algorithm doesn't want your peace, it wants your panic. Social media architectures do not care about nuance. They couldn't care less about peaceful agreement, rational debate, or quiet contentment. The code recognizes one terrifying reality. Anger generates clicks, shares, and endless time spent scrolling on the platform. Anger is, without a doubt, the most profitable emotion ever discovered. Outrage spreads faster and cuts so much deeper than joy ever could.
And right alongside outrage, fear spreads even faster. Now, these technology platforms didn't invent human emotion, obviously. We brought the ancient reactive brains to the table. They simply built the casino. They brilliantly weaponized our biology. Every single push notification, every controversial headline, every emotionally charged post in your feed, it is a relentless, non-stop battle for your psychological engagement. They are throwing simulated psychological threats at your ancient brain hundreds of times a day without you even realizing it's happening.
When you have algorithms constantly turning up the dial on fear and outrage, you experience something truly unique to our modern era, the claustrophobic exhaustion of a mind that never ever stops reacting. This is exactly why so many of us feel completely mentally drained despite sitting perfectly safe on our living room couches. Our bodies are at rest, sure, but our minds are fighting 1,000 invisible psychological wars every single day. We are endlessly simulating survival in a digital world that demands our constant panic.
So how do we fix it? Well, the solution to this exhaustion definitely isn't to become some unfeeling machine. True emotional control is not cold, detached suppression. Suppressing an emotion, shoving the anger or the fear down into the dark, that just forces it into the shadows where it rots into burnout, chronic anxiety, and quiet resentment. Healthy, true control isn't about muting the human experience at all. It's rooted deeply in emotional awareness. It's about finally shining a light on the machinery itself.
Because ultimate freedom, it's simply this: recognizing the emotion without immediately obeying it. Emotional control is the profound ability to feel anger without actually becoming the anger. It's the ability to feel fear without surrendering to the fear. By simply observing the feeling as it rises in your chest, you create just a millimeter of distance between yourself and the impulse. And that tiny, microscopic distance? That creates the necessary space for choice. It's wild, really. We live in this bizarre paradox today, a profound human contradiction. On a deep, societal level, we immensely admire calm, stable leaders. We deeply respect composure. We all crave stability and peace in our own personal lives.
And yet, we constantly reward and voraciously consume emotional volatility online. We vote for the loudest, we click on the angriest, and we share the most unhinged. Navigating this massive cultural contradiction is exactly why mastering emotional control is so incredibly rare and so intensely difficult.
When you piece this all together, the true nature of this skill reveals itself. True power isn't about dominating the people around you, not at all. It's a quiet, invisible strength over oneself. It's the freedom from that impulsive decision that ruins a career. It's the freedom from the subtle manipulation of a profit-driven algorithm. It's the freedom from the external trigger. It is the silent, unshakable strength to remain entirely yourself, completely unbothered, even when the whole world around you is descending into absolute chaos.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one absolute certainty. You are going to face conflict. You'll experience deep frustration, sudden fear, and intense anger. The biological surge will arrive. That is just the inescapable tax of being human. But in that tiny, invisible fraction of a second, the ultimate question remains. Will you let the ancient emotion completely take the wheel, or will you create the silent space to choose? The rest of your life is waiting on your answer.